As I said yesterday, there are passages that it's impossible to glean the richness if you're not using the original language. Certain words we identified in the verses in, specifically in Romans 8, that without the color and the clarity of the Greek, there's a lot of confusion. There's still even a lot of confusion, mind you, among scholars on certain areas of the passages that we were dealing with, which we're going to revisit tonight. But first things first. In the process of knowing that I was going to do some translation, I actually decided I would go and, rather than look at the oldest Greek manuscript that we have available, I would look at the early English versions to see what was said. Now, those who have been around know that we have in our possession that wonderful Wycliffe Bible, Wycliffe's translation, first of its kind, first into the English language. And if you're looking at the Wycliffe, the one that we have, it's very hard to read. Really, there are places where it's downright challenging. So luckily, we have a set of, they're called Wycliffite. This one was done, I think, in 1850 or so, but the font is legible. Some of the writing, even in this, had me scratching my head, and I think I've got a good mastery of Wycliffe's English most of the time. But here's what was funny. You know, when you're not looking for something and then you see something else, and as I was reading the passage in Romans 8, I was going through this and found that if you read on, Romans 8:27, well, your King James says, "And he that searcheth the hearts knoweth what is the mind of the Spirit, because he maketh intercession for the saints according to the will of God." In this version, in this translation, I'd like to call it that because it's the first of its kind, I want you to look at where this circle is, and I'll lift it away. Pay attention to where it is, and I want you to see that we sometimes think we are innovators in language. You got it. He axeth. Did you not see that? So somewhere down, I'm reading upside down now. He axeth. Never mind. It was very funny to me. Sometimes we think we've invented some form of speech, but we really haven't. The ancients have stolen it all. But what was remarkable, now to the serious stuff, what was remarkable is you have to remember that Wycliffe was not necessarily using manuscripts that, and I'm saying plural, that will say someone like Tyndale years later, we know, would have used. And yet, the translation still comes out as singular. I put an arrow there. Our infirmity, not infirmities. If you follow the stream, it's really no wonder, because this is from a probably more Latin and Latinized text. It is no wonder that most of the Roman Catholic versions will read singular too. And it's actually correct because it agrees with the Greek. So that's kind of an interesting thing. If you're reading this, there are places where you just have to go, what what on earth does that mean? Does even there's one section here of Romans 8:28, where it culminates with all things working together into good to him, not to them, to him, that after purpose. Here's the, wait for it, ben clepid syntis. Hallelujah and amen. So, I'm glad we don't have to deal with that. But we do have to deal with a few other things. So, let me take one of the King's Houses sent me this. I have a big one down here, 26 translation. But this is a nice paperback. And really, because the font is much smaller, it's a little harder to read, but it's thinner and a little bit more easy to carry around. So I want to go back and read beginning at verse 26. Romans 8:26 out of the 26 translation, and we'll kind of do a little ping-ponging back and forth. Remember, I started yesterday by kind of looking at the likewise of verse 26. Likewise, in like manner, in the self-same way. So just by virtue of those two versions in front of me, underneath the likewise, it tells you that not only does the language, the Greek language itself, tell me that this is referring back to something else, it's advancing, so there is this thought process in the self-same way, in like manner. Likewise, the Spirit also helpeth, here King James, infirmities. And I'll read you some of the versions from the 26 translation directly beneath that. The Spirit supports us in our weakness, which I don't like that because of what we looked at, which we'll look at again tonight. The Spirit also takes hold with us in our weakness. Kind of close to that Greek word we looked at. The Spirit comes to the aid of our weakness. The Spirit of God not only maintains this hope within us, now they're directly attaching that back to the previous two verses, but helps us in our present limitations. That's why I said it's important to look at the Greek and really pick it apart. For we know not what we should pray for as we ought. Here are some of the versions beneath this. We do not even know how to pray as we should, for we do not know what and how we ought to pray, what is right and proper for us to pray for, what prayer to offer, nor how to offer it worthily as we ought. Where did that come from? That's Amplified Bible. Wait, because I have some other more modern versions, and some of them are rather entertaining, so just hold all these thoughts. But the Spirit itself, King James, maketh intercession for us with groanings which cannot be uttered. Here you're going to see, right here in these English versions, you'll see each one of them going in one direction, and the last one takes off somewhere else. You'll see. Maketh intercession with us with sighings unutterable, makes intercession for us with groans for deliverance which words cannot utter, pleads for us with inexpressible yearnings, but the Spirit himself intercedes on our behalf with sighs too deep for words. The last one is, but through our inarticulate groans, the Spirit himself is pleading for us. Do you see the difference between all of them and the last one? The last one puts the emphasis on our inarticulate groans. The Spirit himself is pleading for us. We'll talk about that, and we'll examine that again tonight. There's a few things I would like to revisit in the Greek. Verse 27, and he that searcheth the hearts, beneath that, and God who searches our innermost being. King James, knoweth what is the mind of the Spirit. Versions beneath that, knows, though it be unspoken, what is the desire of the Spirit, knoweth what is preferred by the Spirit, knows what the Spirit's meaning is. Whew. Because he maketh, King James, intercession for the saints according to the will of God. versions beneath that. Since the Spirit pleads before God for the saints, because he pleads for God's own people in God's own way, because his intercessions for the saints are in harmony with God's will. Okay, so let's pause right there. Now, just a little entertainment for you. The Contemporary Parallel New Testament. You know somewhere here there's something entertaining coming. But I want you to, for the newer listeners, I want to say this for your benefit. People who have been here and it's old school to them. I have said, find a version of the Bible that you will read and start there. I used to think just give everybody a King James Bible. No, find the Bible you will begin to read, to begin to get the gist of what's being said, and then work your way up to something a little bit more challenging. And I still think the King James is still probably the gold standard up there. Because I've said, just start reading the Bible. There's plenty of people who say, well, that's too strange for me. Well, then start somewhere. Start with the NIV or start with the New Living. But the problem, and I emphasize this, is that you've heard the expression lost in translation. Some of these versions do just that. So although I've said publicly, just start reading. If you're just starting out, it can become, believe it or not, it can become the tool used by the devil if you're reading something that is too far beyond, it's already far beyond our understanding as fallen creatures. And then if your reading level is not up to par, you're just going to have a wonderful excuse for not even opening up the book. It's too hard for me to read. It's too complicated. And you'd be surprised how many people do indeed labor as they start their journey through the King James. They basically just, So, but with that being said, let me give you a few examples of contemporary versions of what we're reading, verse 26 and 27. From the New Century Version, also the Spirit helps us with our weakness, singular. We do not know how to pray as we should, but the Spirit himself speaks to God for us, even begs God for us with deep feelings that words cannot explain. God can see what is in people's hearts, and he knows what is in the mind of the Spirit because the Spirit speaks to God for his people in the way God wants. These are very subtle things, but they plow through a theological nightmare. If somebody who's not interested in theology and doctrine, it's going to be like, well, it all sounds kind of the same, but it's not. So that's why I said start somewhere, but don't make that your, the absolute. The NASB, the New American Standard Bible. In the same way, the Spirit also helps our weakness, singular. For we do not know how to pray as we should, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. And he who searches the hearts knows what the mind of the Spirit is, because he intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. Contemporary English Version. Oh, again, here it comes. This is a good one. In certain ways, we are weak. You think? But the Spirit is here to help us. Da, 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 da. For example, when we do not know what to pray, what we do not know to pray for, the Spirit prays for us in ways that cannot be put into words. That's not at all what the text is saying. All of our thoughts are known to God. He can understand what is in the mind of the Spirit as the Spirit prays for God's people. All of these are just going off somewhere else. NIV. In the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, singular. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groans that words cannot express. And he who searches our hearts knows the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints in accordance with God's will. You can always already see a bifurcation in the understanding. And this is a difficult one. As to, I said yesterday, it must be us who does the groaning. And we'll look at the text and I'll elaborate. I don't necessarily see the Spirit groaning. I see the Spirit picking up and carrying the other side of the burden. Hold that thought. They also have the New King James Version, but that really, the only thing they did with the New King James Version is they changed itself to himself. Not too much has changed there. The New Living Translation, there's only two more, and I'm saving the best for last. You know it's going to be there. The New Living Translation, and the Holy Spirit helps us in our distress. For we don't even know what we should pray for, nor how we should pray. But the Holy Spirit prays for us with groanings that cannot be expressed in words. And the Father, who knows all the hearts, knows what the Spirit is saying, for the Spirit pleads for us believers in harmony with God's own will. Good and bad things in there. Here is the pièce de résistance, the Message Bible. Oh boy, what a message this is. See, the problem is I don't even have chapter and verse here. But this is where verse 26 would pick up. Meanwhile, well, wait. The moment we get tired of waiting, God's Spirit is right alongside helping us along. So we get tired of waiting. That tied it into the previous verse about if you hope for what you see, then why do you need hope? But we are hoping and waiting, enduring, patiently waiting for. So it's tying it into the previous verse exactly by saying the moment we get tired. In fact, I want to go back and read because there's something so nutty in here. We, of course, do not see what is enlarging us. We are enlarged in the waiting. Let me ask you a question because I'm not sure what exactly is being said there, okay? I'm sorry, but the longer we wait, the larger we become. And the more joyful our expectancy. Okay, meanwhile, the moment we get tired in the waiting, God's Spirit is right alongside helping us along. If we don't know how or what to pray, it doesn't matter. That's what it says. It doesn't matter. He does our praying in and for us, making prayer out of our wordless sighs, our aching groans. He knows far better than we know. He knows us far better than we know ourselves. He knows our pregnant condition. Wowza. And keeps us present before God. That's why we can be so sure that every detail in our lives of love for God is worked into something good. Well, if you're pregnant, I guess so. Okay. That's why I said start reading something except for that version. But realize what we're dealing with here. And that's crazy. Okay. So let's go back to our text, less the crazy stuff. First things first. If we're going to look at the text from the most extant, oldest manuscript, we have a little bit of a problem. And the problem is that the oldest extant in this case would be the Chester Beatty Papyri. There's a kind of nice, neat story if we have time, and if not, to be continued, about the Chester Beatty Papyri and how it all kind of came together. But there are parts of the papyri that are incomplete. It just so happens that, for example, Ephesians and I believe Galatians are virtually complete. There's nothing missing. But as you go through the papyri, you realize that some of the bottom is gone. In fact, for us, verse 26 is not there, but verse 27 onward is. Verses 27 through 35. Don't mind the sticker, that's for something else, which we might get to tonight, maybe. So when we talk about going and looking at the oldest that we have, you kind of almost have to know the first things first. There's a part of this from this papyri that's missing. It's just not there. In fact, if you go back, it's where you'll see where it's essentially it would have been at the bottom of this particular papyri. It's gone. So there's a good reason why some difficulty in the rendering and translation of verse 26. Now, if you have, like we do, access, that's the papyri, and this is the translation, Greek, straight Greek, off of the plates, off of the papyri. You can definitely see, it will tell you how many lines are lost. Our verse 26 is not there, which again brings up the issue of probably the next best source after this would be starting with either the Alexandrinus or the Vaticanus. We'll call them one of the three Sinaiticus, one of the three older. But as I was reviewing this, something just clicked in my brain, because we've often placed this papyri in close proximity to those three manuscripts, when in fact, one of the scholars who actually wrote a book on the papyri, he brings it a lot before the time we've actually, I and Dr. Scott have both referenced its time frame, slightly, actually much earlier. So that's just a sidebar. When you're looking back at something that is that old, it's quite miraculous that there's that much intact. But that verse 26 is not there. Now let's go to the verse. Let's take a look at, and I've put it there for you on my tablet because I do want to show you a couple of things. So let's do this. I'm going to write this out here, the things that we don't really have to deal with. Likewise, we have here de, kai, also. And then this is something I just want to point out to you. The Spirit. I want you to see what the King James did. The Spirit also here. Elsewhere, I noticed that in some of the places where they added, it's just the Spirit, but places where we have to read itself, they translated the particle that goes before, like autu would be him, and because it is neutral, their dilemma was, you can't put a gender on it, therefore it must become itself, which, yes, could make it neutral, but also represents it more as a thing, even though it can be a person, but that not, in today's world, that's perfectly acceptable. But in the Bible, it's not. So even though I have said over and over again, the Holy Spirit is neutral because the Holy Spirit inhabits men and women, the gift given out on the day of Pentecost, both to men and to women. Here, I just want you to see that to is there for a purpose, the definite article. And here we've got our wonderful word that the King James translated simply helpeth, soon, anti, and I want to spell it out for you, soon, phonetically, anti, and lambenetai. I'm going to make the I a Y, so you know that if I put an I, it might not. Lambenetai, okay? Something interesting about this in the declension, in Greek you don't conjugate, you have declension, is that this is in, it could be a middle or a passive deponent, which means there is there is no active voice here. But I broke it down into the three parts. Soon, with, anti, which can be sometimes against. There's various, in fact, let's do this so you while we're here, let's just take the time and do it. So you can at least get a small microcosm here of what this looks like. All right. Anti, from 473 in the Strongs. Opposite, instead, or because. Rarely in addition to. For, often used in compositions to denote contrast, requital, substitution, correspondence, etc. Here specifically, we would be using it as to actually to hold, and here this we'll call this to take. Lambenetai has, boy, if you read that in the Strongs, it's got a long definition from lambano, got a long definition. So we have the spirit who is essentially taking hold of, we looked at this, our weakness, the weakness, singular, singular, you can tell by the ending. It is also, there's all kinds of neat things that you can pick up here. That being that it's dative, it's inside, it's part of us, it's part of our being, of us, umon, of us or our. Togarti, we know this is for, and we'll do this here, the what. And the word we should pray, this verb we should pray, which I want to talk about because I referenced the other word yesterday, de, but I want to talk about this, prosuko meta, what we should pray. We should pray. In fact, if you don't mind, I want to put down two other words because that'll help me to show you something between what we should pray and katho de. That's the word I was highlighting. So katho, as, and as is necessary. Okay. Something just, I wrote down all these words. This word, pro suko metha, from prosuke. This is very interesting because amongst all the words in the Greek, this one word is restricted and always refers to prayers to God specifically. We can make prayers and petitions in other ways. This one is specifically prayers to God as, in fact, I'm going to change this, not just necessary, but needed or needful. Might even say what is required, but necessary is fine too, necessary. So instead of saying like some of those translations where it says, you know, there's all kinds of ideas about what this means, it's pretty clear that we're dealing with prayer to God specifically and what is necessary. what is absolutely needed or necessary. Let's continue on. We'll write the rest of it out. Uk, which is always a negative. Uk, oidamin. Not, we know. Should have done that in red, but it's too late. So we'll just keep going. Ala, but. And here's why I think in this later itself, I just finished referencing that. Autu in the Greek, and that was their conundrum. What to do with this? It's appearing neutral, so hence itself. But I prefer, it seems so almost, it's blasphemous. I don't know, to refer to the Holy Spirit as it, in my opinion. Borderline blasphemous anyway. So, but autu. It's neutral, I know, but I'm calling him a him. Sorry. Himself. The Spirit. And this word intercedes. In fact, I wanted to skip over this, but you know what? I think I want to write it out for you because I want to go and show you a little bit of, we'll do a little bit of morphological tagging. Boy, I'm sure that has everybody really thrilled. You're all just ecstatic inside. We're morphological tagging tonight. Excitement. All right. Intercedes. I may have to go to a second page. I'll write down here. Stenagmois. Groanings. Ala letois. Groanings. Here's your putting it kind of in reverse, if you will. This has unexpressed. I don't even know that that's adequate. We'll talk about that as well. So let's do a little tagging here first. And the most important thing I want you to look at, first and foremost, I want to go back to that word for help, the verb for help. We're going to look at that word just briefly. Let's find another color. Let's use blue. All right. So I said it's a verb, which means there's action going on. It's indicative, which makes it factual. And then here's something interesting. It's present, which means ongoing and continuous. We're not talking about, it means that each time we enter into the perplexity of prayer, not general and generic, but specifically with difficulty. And that, by the way, is open to interpretation, is the difficulty to ask God to deliver us from something or to give us the strength to go through is the question. I could open up 1,000 different questions on the difficulty and the perplexity. If you really think about it, you can go to God all day long, multiple times a day. But if you're really thinking about it and you're really wanting to ask because you know that God hears our prayers, the difficulty may be exactly, and I'm going to revert back to something, exactly what is needed. And I think I said this yesterday, a lot of times you think you know what you need to pray for. But then a lot of times, if you really reflect, it may not really be the thing you needed to pray for to begin with. And I don't want this to become where people get confused now. Well, if they take this and try and apply it to a general, you're sick and you know that you need to be healed. And asking for healing is not, shouldn't be too much complication there because if you know what your sickness is, with specificity, you're asking God to heal this particular ailment. pretty simple. That's a general prayer. But there are things we grapple with. I can think of, there's parents here, and I'm thinking of one particular set of parents in the church that I'm sure, because they have had such a difficult time with one of their children, I'm sure maybe, I don't even know what, I couldn't even imagine having to pinpoint what exactly to pray for. Is it that child gets delivered and healed because that's the side you want to see happen? Or is it that the only way for the child to get delivered and healed is that it truly hits rock bottom? I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying something that even seems pale by comparison to the one agonizing it out as to what is the answer to this? And if you've ever been there in that, what is the answer to this mindset? Then there may be a reality check that maybe there isn't a clear path. And maybe I just have to groan it out before God. I'm not even opening my mouth, and it's there that God understands even my inarticulate. If he knows our hearts and he knows the mind, he even knows the laborings, the struggle within to try and formulate the right thought process, even though even that is going to be flawed, and sees that. And this is how, as I said, for this word, the Spirit basically picks up the other side of my heavy burden and helps me in that to pick it up, carry it, and bring it forth in a way that it is essentially, it gets to where it needs to go. That may not make any sense to you, but it makes perfect sense to me. Now, back to this verb indicative present. And as I said, this would be either it lacks an active voice. It is either labeled as a middle or as a passive deponent. The problem with that is that it can't be a passive deponent. It would mean that the Spirit is not doing his part either. So it must be middle, as a middle deponent. That simply means it has no active voice. The weakness of us, for, as I said, the what we should pray for, what is absolutely necessary here. And we do not know. I'm curious to see this, the oidamin. That's kind of interesting. So that's why I like grammar a lot. This oidamin, verb indicative, something interesting. Remember, there's a negative here, but verb indicative perfect, which even kind of spells out the whole gist of the problem. Perfectly not. How's that? Okay? But himself, the Spirit, intercedes. Let's take a look at that one. That is just a simple verb indicative present. That means ongoing and active. But don't think that he is going to just pick up your load and take it away. You've got to work it out with him. This is why there's passages in the Bible that really kind of counterbalance this. When Paul says you're to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who worketh in you. There is a working or a work happening, but it's not going to be God's going to do it all for you. Imagine having a child and the child never picks up a dish, never cleans its room. Well, when they're a certain age that might work, but you get to a certain point when the kid that was a toddler is now a teenager and won't do any of that, you're going to be a very disgruntled parent doing all the work for your child. Well, this is the same thing. God's looking at it saying, no, he expects us to get in the work and the agony of prayer, but the Spirit picks up the other side of that for us. And then groaning unexpressed. Let me talk about that, because there are obviously two schools of interpretation on this. And in examining this text, it seems like in a simple reading, the way the King James reads, the Spirit itself maketh intercession for us with groanings which cannot be uttered. Several errors have been spawned out. Definitively, you can just say, nope, it's not that. People have interpreted this passage to suggest that this is tongues, by the way. But that absolutely, unequivocally cannot be what is being described here, because universally every mention of tongues either requires an interpreter, but it is a language that is indeed uttered, and even though it may, in some cases, at least in one or two, was not understood, it was indeed uttered. These are, they're not coming out of the mouth. So you can check that off. People say, oh, that's tongues. You can just throw that in the garbage can. It's not, okay? But, and I'm being absolute about that. There are two schools of interpretation on this passage. One is that the Spirit is doing the groaning with essentially words that cannot be expressed or uttered. And the reason why I am not going there is because, think of it this way. The Godhead, the triune Father, Son, and Spirit. The Father possesses all knowledge and wisdom, and so doesn't Jesus. You can't then separate and say, and the Spirit doesn't possess this either. Therefore, I'm not saying that it's impossible for God to groan. We read in the scriptures, Jesus was in one of the times where he's praying, or actually he was healing a man. I'm sorry, it's the wrong reference. He was healing a man, he groaned, and then he prayed to the Father. And the word is quite similar. There's one exception there, and that is, don't forget, he was all man and all God in the record we have as he was in the flesh. But if we're talking about the perfection of God the Father, in fact, now as Christ is glorified and by the right hand of the Father, there is no shortfalling in him. The idea that he would groan or have inadequate communication doesn't fly. And this third person of the Godhead is no different. So think of it this way. Let's go take all of these things down the longest pathway you can. If it is the Spirit that is interceding for us and groaning with words that cannot be expressed or unexpressible, then how the hell is he talking to the Father? Sorry. I'm going to be as colloquial as possible, but you've got to analyze this properly. There's too many nitwits out there who will formulate some type of doctrine based on I don't know what, so maybe being pregnant out of that other version. Okay. That pretty much covers that. And I think what I wanted to kind of highlight here, just so we have some clarity, as I already know I'm not gonna touch the rest of what I wanted to do, because it's like opening up another level of something which requires a whole different setting. What I want to say about this, and I think this is why it comforted me so much. I'm in the scriptures, I'm reading the Bible all the time. Until I actually peeled this apart, looked at everything that's in there, and of course with verse 27, he that searcheth the hearts, that's the Father, knoweth what is the mind of the Spirit, because he maketh intercession for the saints according to the will of God. We need to probably dissect that as well, and kind of see, at least minimally, the comfort that comes from this is it's not always easy to pray. There isn't, people like to say, well, there's this pattern, you pray. Jesus even taught his disciples to pray. Think about this for a minute. And I've kind of just mulled this around my brain. These men that followed Jesus, they were not unfamiliar with prayer life. They were not unfamiliar with prayer life. They weren't heathen. So think about how staggering it is that they asked him, Lord, teach us to pray. And these are men who, were praying men, just not the same way that Christ laid it out for them, but these were men of the faith. So it's very plain to me that we can come into an environment and we can think we know, but even these humble themselves to ask, Lord, teach us to pray. Okay, there is a template there that Christ lays out for his disciples, which, by the way, includes probably everything that you could think of: provision, forgiveness, relation to fellow man, all the things that basically hit us on a daily basis. The key thing for me is that there are, as I said, there are times where it seems very straightforward. I get a prayer request and somebody says, I'm sick, or there's been a tragedy in my family. To my limited knowledge of what's been given to me, that's what I take in prayer. I don't have difficulty with wrapping my mind around the fact that there are shades. There's not just the event of the individual saying, I'm hurt or a tragedy's happened. Let's just take somebody who's sick. It's not just necessarily their sickness, but I think about their household, the spouse, the care that's required, the physician they might need. I mean, there's so many branches of this thing that's not just, somebody calls in and they say they're sick, so just pray that they get healed. But that's still a general prayer. The things that I'm looking at here kind of bring me back to something in this whole 8th chapter. And let me just tell you. Because back there in the 18th verse, he says, I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared in the glory which shall be revealed in us. If you think about it, whatever the sufferings were that Paul is referring to, the trials that come upon us, the groaning ourselves, even though we have the first fruit, the deposit of the Spirit in us. And you're going to find something. If you in your own time will read straight through until verse 30, you're even going to find that verse 28 is going to take on, and I intend, but believe me, I intend to translate verse 28 as well. Verse 28 will take on a new meaning with new eyes in context. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. And keep going on. Yes, the translation is not good, but there's going to be something that's going to link us back, both in this helper who is in us, the knowledge that God knows our hearts and essentially knows what we are going through, and the wonderful and poor translation in verse 28, but the wonderful idea that the very thing that we perhaps are praying, that we don't know how to pray, so we're wrestling it out in prayer, the Holy Spirit takes up that other side and essentially lifts the load and brings it on our behalf, if you will. And it's kind of maybe pushing the edge a little bit. But that when you read this verse 28 and onward, you recognize this has to mean a lot more than God entering in to situations that you might have used this verse for, but rather in our deepest struggles. In fact, if you go back and read in our sufferings, in the trials that take hold of us, in the waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body, in the process of being here. You might find a lot more comfort in the knowledge that not only does God hear and understand and know our frail prayers and our groanings, but in fact, as they are essentially brought before Him, He knows how to go to work on those things. Now, I don't want to do anything more in verse 28 because I need to translate it for it to make sense. But this whole passage tells me God hears our prayers even when we faultily, with all of our frailty, with all of our the diversions of our mind, He hears and understands us. This is the thing I love. When I'm certain of this in my lifetime, very few people have really understood me. I think Dr. Scott did, but very few people have understood me. I've always been the most misunderstood person. I've always felt that way. And yet, I have this great comfort that right here in these verses, I find God understands. Not just that He knows about me. I quoted a passage out of another book. Work out your salvation with fear and trembling, phobias and traumas, for it is God that worketh in you. He's not only working it out in me, but He's also working it out for me. This definitely is not some independent thought. This indeed does require the mind of Christ. This isn't some carnal play tiddlywinks and, like the people that would have this would become a name it and claim it. There's a whole host of scriptures talking about prayer that have been twisted and warped. The one out of James, let him pray the prayer of faith. There's another one where Jesus is talking. He's essentially saying, what you ask for, you'll receive. Okay, think of that in the whole framework of Matthew 6:33. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. If you're truly seeking after what it is to please the Lord, then think about when we bring certain things, even the things we think that might be in the realm of spiritual when we're wrestling something out, may still be in the realm of carnal according to the way we see it. And because we have a limited and faulty understanding of how God looks upon us with His perfect purpose for us, we still kind of fumble around. And yet He sees and understands. And the comfort that I have is that in the times when I feel like I haven't been able to get it across, that's when I really know that I was working to get to the heart of something. And even though I maybe failed in my purpose, the Spirit has picked up the burden on the other side and brought it before God. And if you've ever been there, if you haven't been there, then this doesn't mean anything to you. But if you've been there and you know what I'm talking about, it's the greatest comfort in the world. And yes, I'm sure people will get buffeted by the devil when you get into that place where you're trying to pray and nothing is congealing, the words and the thought and putting your mind to something. The devil will come and say, see, I'm either messing with your brain or God's not going to hear your prayers. You need to take comfort in this, what's being said right here. And if there is a warping of the passions that God enters into all things to work His good, perhaps the all things you might find actually might be all, as in not all plural, but all singular. Sunergai, with energy, with help, with assistance. In whatever that might be that I'm still working out. I don't know about you, but this has been a tremendous, like a burden was lifted off my heart. For how many times I have tried to pray and felt like, well, I'm having a discussion. I don't even know if I've communicated what it is I'm really needing to say. God knows. The beauty of that is that Paraclete that Christ promised, that has been given to us as the earnest of our inheritance, who understands clearly what is being wrestled out in prayer. The great Charles Spurgeon, I had to write this down and read it to you. Great Charles Spurgeon said this. He said, "The feeblest prayer, if it be sincere, is written upon the heart by the Holy Spirit, and God will always own the handwriting of the Holy Spirit. Many prayers written by the Holy Spirit on the heart seem to be written with faint ink. Moreover, it seems to be blotted and defiled by our imperfection. But the Holy Spirit can always read his own handwriting. He knows his own notes. And when he has issued a prayer, he will not disown it." Hope this helps you. Get on the telephone.